Hello, patrons. How's it going?
Hello.
My voice sounds different than it is. Usually it's because it has disappeared. I'm halfway through The Little Mermaid, my voice leaving me for
I thought
a
that meant you were
magical
too. I
journey.
thought that meant you were too busy screaming at the movie or something like that.
I honestly, I don't know what happened. I feel fine. I don't feel sick. I feel
Interesting.
physically fine.
Very
I worked
interesting,
out
man.
earlier today, even. Like everything's functioning normal except my
I mean,
voice is God. So who
I
knows?
have
Maybe this is the beginning of the end.
I have a valid excuse for my voice feeling a little bit less than when compared to my normal exuberance. I just got back from a friend's bachelor party this past weekend where a lot of unhealthy choices were made. So mine's a little fatigued right now. So I
Wow.
don't know what's up with you, man.
I don't know. It's definitely not that. I don't know.
the Florida weather is just
Who
messing with
knows?
you.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Florida just being Florida, and
Yeah,
God,
Florida-ing.
yeah. Before we kind of get into, I have a couple of topics I want to talk about. Before we do,
All right.
though, a little bit of insight into my night because, as most of you know, I am a father of two,
Right.
and our youngest just turned 5 months old, right? So he's still a little one. And there are times where between both of my sons, I feel like the father of the year. There are those moments where you feel great, and you love them to death. You do good
Yeah.
things for them. And then there
Yeah.
are moments like tonight where I am not the father of the year.
What did you
Because
do?
here's what happened. I'm gonna give you the ending though and Tarantino this a little bit.
Oh,
So
this is
we'll
the
work
greatest form of
backwards.
fiction I think we're ever going to pulp.
Yeah. So what happened was I'm sitting on the couch holding Andrew, the little one.
Yeah.
And he likes to put everything in his mouth. He's teething as one does. And sometimes he'll put your finger, he'll grab your fingers and he'll put it in his mouth. That's common. That happens all the time.
Sure.
Nothing weird there. Tonight though, he did that where he took my finger, put it in his mouth, but almost instantaneously as he did that, blood curdling scream, freaking out, spitting, like not like throwing up, spitting up, but like gagging. Like he was like spitting out actively, like there was something wrong. Like he tasted something and just needed to get it out and was freaking out, crying hard. And it took me a second and I figured out what it was. So, and this is why I feel terrible about this. So earlier tonight,
This is so suspenseful. I am literally on the edge of my seat right now. Like, what happened?
I knew what it was pretty much immediately. But what happened was I had made dinner earlier tonight for my wife and myself.
Yeah.
And while doing so, you're chopping up vegetables and you're putting everything together. And the one thing that I did not think about is that I had chopped up a little bit of a spicy pepper.
I was going to say, there is some type of spice on your finger, wasn't there?
There was a little bit of a spicy pepper. And, and after I had eaten, I'd cleaned up and stuff. So it's not like I just had food lingering on my hand, but there was some residual from cutting up that pepper.
Oh, what kind of pepper was it? It wasn't a ghost pepper, was it?
No,
Jalapeno or something like that?
What one? No, it wasn't a jalapeno. Oh man, what one?
Was it on the lower end of the Schofield spectrum?
Yeah,
than even a jalapeno?
it wasn't crazy. It wasn't too crazy.
Something like maybe like just a green or a red pepper or something like
Yeah,
that.
it was a green one, but it wasn't like a bell pepper. It was there's a little kick
or a banana pepper or something like that.
Yeah, and so at any rate, like I had done that, cleaned up. Obviously there was some residual on it, and I didn't think about it. And as soon as he put it in his mouth, he screamed so hard. So we had to, Mama took him and fed him and got some milk in his system.
I was gonna say that's there's a reason why milk is what we always have on Hot Ones when we watch those interviews, right?
So it worked out fine. Thankfully, she was there, because she was getting ready to go to the store to run some errands. If that would have happened while she was gone, I don't even know. I would have called 911 probably.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I would have freaked out so hard.
Did I break my baby?
Yeah, because I felt so bad, but like because it's one of those I never really thought about it, and
Right.
and I especially felt bad because you take care of him, everything's fine, and
Hmm.
then later on in the evening, I'm not really thinking about it, putting my finger near my eye, like rubbing my eyes, and my
Oh,
eye starts to twitch a little bit. I'm like, oh no, there's still a little bit there on my finger, and I didn't even and
that
so I was
stuff
like,
is hard to get off, dude. It
yeah, and I
really
was like,
is.
it wasn't terrible, but I could feel it. And I was like, and now it's been a few hours, and imagine like maybe an hour after eating dinner it was probably a little bit more potent.
Yeah.
And yeah, I felt bad.
There's a
And
reason why you have to wash your hands for like 3 hours when you get them covered in
yeah.
pepper.
Yeah, it wasn't my best moment. And yeah, the whole night I was just hugging him and apologizing as if he had any
It's
clue what I was saying. But that was my whole evening pretty much.
but yeah, I mean, it takes a good father to at least recognize, oh, I got to help him. He's in pain.
Yeah.
Because it's such a funny story. I feel like a bad dad would just be like, this is funny, just laugh at the kid, which you obviously did
No,
not
I
do.
was freaking out. No, but it's fun. Like in hindsight, though, that was Brandy. She's like, "We're
Mm.
gonna laugh at this, and years down the road, I'm
Oh, of
gonna
course
tell
you are.
everybody that you tried to give our baby spicy food, and that's gonna be the story going forward." So,
Well,
you
that's the
know,
story going forward, starting right now, because
starting
that's what
right
this
now. Yeah,
Patreon published content here is going to signify.
yeah. So that was my night. As we kind of get into this,
Mhm.
and again, I apologize. I do want to start here, but we won't end here. I did finish reading Order of the Phoenix.
There it
And I
is. There it
just
is.
I just have to say this. I didn't dislike it, but the ending to Order of the Phoenix the movie is miles better than the book.
I completely agree. I agree.
The action sequences, if you will, there are some elements it's a little goofier in the book. And
Well,
there
and
are elements of
it's
that
also darker. It's also darker too because there are moments where J.K. Rowling is clearly trying to make you think that even someone as popular as Hermione might die.
Absolutely. Neville gets hurt. I'm trying to remember. Not Luna. Ron kind of gets stung by something. There's like a
Yeah,
jinx he gets hit by that's not
yeah,
in the movie at all. So yeah, I mean, and Neville's a little bit more involved in an interesting way. So like
hmm,
again, I don't dislike it. If anything, it's just more different. But I like the seamlessness in the more dire tone of the movie that
hmm,
isn't quite there in the book, at least not consistently so. And then, of course, when you get to the ending, like the fight as we see it between Dumbledore and Voldemort is so good in the movie, and then
right.
how that crystallizes with Harry, talking about how he feels sorry for Voldemort, that he'll never know love and friendship, which that isn't really in the book, and they
Yeah,
added that to the movie, and that
yeah.
just makes that moment all the more
Well,
poignant.
we've talked about this many times. We haven't said this in a podcast form, so I guess just to let our listeners and watchers know what we're referring to. One thing that you and I have always appreciated now about the movie as opposed to the Order of the Phoenix, the book, is the way it adapts the book, but takes a lot of its plot points and uses them more for thematic purposes as opposed to just narrative plot points.
Yeah.
Because that whole idea of Harry feeling sorry for Voldemort, this idea that he does not know love nor friendship, as Harry says in the movie, that's more or less given to us in a narrative silver platter in the book. And that's which, okay, like that's a fine notion, but the whole movie series kind of took that notion and made it more of a thematic arc and an emotional one, as opposed to just here's what this movie is actually about.
Yeah. Then here's
Uh,
what it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
the book kind of. I'm trying to say this delicately, but I think the ending of the book treats its audience like it's dumb. I really do think it does.
It
It's just
does
it's
it
so
does spell
literal.
it out. You're not wrong. And if that's how it played out in movie form, I would not have enjoyed that at all.
No, no.
I love where it goes. Again, the art of adaptation is something that isn't talked about enough. I don't think.
I agree. I agree.
Like it really is incredible how they took what was there, condensed it, and made it so cinematic.
Yeah.
And because it's a book and trying to approach the material as that, again, I didn't wholly dislike it. There are interesting caveats that JK throws in there, which
Sure.
in novel form I don't hate in a vacuum,
Hmm.
such as, how Neville is involved way more there, not just in terms of the final action, but even Dumbledore talking about the prophecy and his
Yeah,
potential inclusion there.
the fact that the prophecy itself in the book really it never even says Harry's name. So
No.
it kind of I like the idea in the book that there's this inevitability that Voldemort was always going to lose if he chose to hunt down the person that he thought the prophecy was about, right? Like
Yeah.
there is that interesting idea, but I don't know, there's something about the entanglement of Neville specifically. The specificity of what J.K. Rowling chose to tell us has always frustrated me in that book. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like one of those, like, I guess, double-edged sword things, right? And I feel like the
Yeah.
book kind of falls victim of that
Well,
at times.
and look, like in a vacuum, some of that I do find interesting because
Sure.
it kind of comes down to this idea like, okay, let's put it in the context of like Jesus and the disciples. And
Right.
then at some point in their journey, they're like, well, maybe that guy over there is Jesus instead.
Yeah.
What if, how do we know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like there's almost two Jesuses.
Yeah.
But like in terms of storytelling, we like the chosen one.
Sorry
narrative.
to interrupt, but you basically just spelled out the plot synopsis for Monty Python's Life of Brian, right?
Yeah.
So Neville is Brian.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good point. But we do like the chosen one narrative,
Yeah.
whether it be Jesus himself or you got Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
And so like I think from like a film perspective, them committing to that and they also rewrite Neville in the movies too because
Yeah.
his parents are killed. They're not just at some loony hospital as they're described in the book. No, they're dead. So like there's still some interesting parallel between the
Yeah.
two that I think is really great. And Neville grows as a character throughout all of them in some
Yeah.
really fascinating ways. So like the changes they make to the movies I think are very good considering they want to commit to there's no ambiguity. Harry is
Yeah.
the chosen one.
Yeah.
And it comes down between him and Voldemort. And since you're so much more restrained because of time, I think that makes sense. You don't need to get bogged down in the what ifs in
Yeah.
the movies. And where in the books you can explore that a little bit more.
You can.
Like
Yeah.
I much prefer what they do in the movie. Again, it's a little disjointed in the book, but in a vacuum, there's some provocative things that I do appreciate.
Yeah.
Um,
But you do make a great point that the adaptation process is an art that we don't often talk about enough.
it's
And the screenwriter for Order of the Phoenix was, what was his name? Michael Goldberg, I think it was, something like that. Maybe Goldenberg. I'd have to look this up. So forgive me if I'm, butchering this person's name. But as far as I understand, this individual only wrote one Harry Potter movie, and it was this one. The rest of them were all adapted by Steve Kloves. So it's kind of interesting that the one person who comes in and does the least faithful written adaptation, what I think is so interesting about this person's adaptation is that he essentially takes what happens in the book, adapts it, but writes it in a way that feels more like a thematic progression. So everything that Dumbledore tells Harry at the end of the book, this giant silver platter we're talking about, it is still somehow incorporated very naturally in conversation in the movie. But it's subtle. It's there. The nuances of it are there. The seeds are there. It's just told in a more organic and character focused way,
yeah.
which I think is the sign of a great adaptation, if you ask me.
I agree. I completely agree. And the other thing that I find really interesting, and we'll end here because I do want to transition to something else real fast.
Sure.
But the one thing that we haven't really talked about in any of these, these Patreon hangout sessions is the fact, or I might have mentioned this in the first time, but throughout all these books, the one thing that's really interesting, I would love to know what the process was for doing all of these films, because to me, it suggests, and again, maybe this is well-known knowledge, but because I've never really delved into the books, I haven't paid attention to this.
Sure.
But to me, it seems as if they have had a plan for what they wanted to do for the movie series from the beginning. And I say that
Yeah.
because there are elements in these books where in the film adaptation they are missing, but they pop up in later movies.
Yeah.
Like that's something that has happened several times from reading these last 3 or 4 books, is that there's this interest, like Ron and him trying out for Quidditch. That's in this book. That's an Order of the Phoenix book, but
Yeah.
that's a plot line in Half-Blood Prince movie.
Yeah. Yeah. They
You
waited.
know what I mean? And it's
they
done
waited for
so
it.
differently. Like the whole with Ron getting involved, all of that. Like it's when they're in fact Ron and not Ron, Harry and Hermione are watching the Quidditch match of Ron when they're taken into the forest, and Hagrid shows them his giant brother. That
Yeah.
again, that is so different in the book. Like Ron is with them in the movie when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like again, it's just one of those interesting things where like, okay, well we're gonna write that out of Order of the Phoenix, the movie, because we just don't have enough time. We gotta emphasize Harry and his growth as a character. The Dumbledore army, his anger, his pushback even against his friends, and then ultimately how he comes to be like, I can't do this on my own. It has to be love and friendship. That's the ending we have to land on here, and we don't have time for Quidditch.
It does kind of make sense that there maybe was a bit of a plan there with the movies, at least with the back half of the movie series, right? And that's of course coincidentally when David Yates was directing the entire back half. So perhaps,
but I would even go back to Azkaban, because again there are
Look at
stuff
most-
in,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
stuff in Azkaban the book that shows up in Goblet of Fire movie.
the movie, yeah,
And same thing. Like it kind of like there are just elements that it feels like they want to touch on. They have to reorder it a little bit in the movies because they don't have time to get into all of it, and they also have to change it up a little bit. And honestly, like I kind of love how they write Ron and his Quidditch stuff in the movie in Half-Blood
I
Prince.
agree. I
It's
think it
so
fits the
different,
tone
but it's a
there.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
It fits the tone.
yeah.
And there's everything with the little serum that he gets because of the Half-Blood Prince book and all that sort of stuff. Like all of that is effective. So like
Yeah.
again, like there's no way they just did that on a whim, right?
Probably not. No, it had to
They
be
had
planned.
to
But
have planned that out.
it's just so interesting to see this film series and judge them as an overarching adaptation process, knowing that it starts as you can almost say that there was no script for that first movie. It was just, here's the book,
Yeah.
here's your script. Like it is such a literal adaptation.
It's the beginning of it. That kind of makes sense.
But it is just interesting to see that adaptation process shift and evolve with these movies. It just is like, it becomes a little looser, a little more disconnected, as it should. That's what you would expect. But the way it does and what they choose to plan out, what they choose not to, it's just interesting watching that trajectory play out.
It's great. I just, as I read these books and then knowing that the process of the movies, like to me they had to have planned this out, as far as what they were going to include in the next movie,
Right.
Even if that's not in the book. And you also can't help in retrospect to think of that with how the new Star Wars trilogy went. It's like, okay, this is the difference. This is the difference between planning something out and then doing it on a
then
whim,
not.
as Lucasfilm tried to do. You know what
I mean,
Like,
hey, at least when Alfonso Cuarón came in and directed, Prisoner of Azkaban, he made his own movie, but still abided by the rules of the adaptation. So he kind of, as much as I do like The Last Jedi, that's not really what Ryan Johnson did. Let's be clear about that.
I agree. All right.
Yeah.
Before we get to the actual show, I also want to go here. When was the last time? Let's talk Oliver Stone, Brendan. When was the last time you saw JFK?
Oh, a long
time
ago. Yeah.
Okay, I can't give you this homework now because things are going to get way too busy as we get to the end of the year. But at some point, I'd be curious for you to rewatch this and so we can talk about it a little bit more, because I did watch this on Saturday night.
Okay.
Some friends came over. And I don't know if it was because of Oppenheimer and now everyone is in the mood for these 3-hour, real life stories. So to
These
speak.
these
I don't know.
3-hour men talking movies.
I don't know if that's what it is or not. But they wanted to watch JFK, and I was like, I haven't seen this film in quite a long time, and man, JFK is incredible. It is
Yeah.
terrific. Like I've always liked this film. Oliver Stone, I'm a little wary on,
Hey,
because like
it's kind of like with Tim Burton, right? The early
yeah,
stuff is great. Oliver
yeah,
Stone, the early stuff is great.
absolutely, and it's also interesting because. And again, this kind of goes back to that conversation we've had about a few filmmakers. We talked about this with JK even a few weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you learn about them in real life and you look back at their work retrospectively and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Oliver Stone, God love him, he a little bit of a wacky dude. Like some of his conspiracy theory stuff, I don't subscribe to at all.
No,
like he's
I
out there.
gotta say it's fun to listen to sometimes.
It-
I
it
have to
is-
give him credit there. I don't think that's
Yeah.
his intent, but I enjoy listening to it even if it is beyond.
Well,
maddening.
and I bring that up to say I don't subscribe to some of the extremes he goes to with some of
Sure.
those theories.
Sure.
However, and it's also interesting because is there a bigger conspiracy theory than John F. Kennedy? Like, I don't know if there is. This and the moon landing have to be the two biggest, right?
Right.
Except maybe some cryptos, but JFK is certainly up there, top 3,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so you go back and you watch this film, but Oliver Stone, that is, he does not treat this film like a conspiracy theory. He
Right.
treats this as this is the goddamn truth. This is what happened. And you're watching it, and there's such a strong conviction, and the performances are really great, and it's so well written
Mm-hmm.
that as I'm watching this, I'm like, maybe this is how it played out.
Oh, I think that's like
maybe I will subscribe
he
to
is
this.
so dedicated to his own beliefs that the fact that he is almost willing and able to convince you that this is in fact history. And here's the thing: maybe he's onto something with it.
Maybe it's right. I don't know.
And I think that's kind of the point: is that because
Yeah.
no one really knows, sometimes it just takes a little bit of forceful dedication to those beliefs to convince someone that they're true.
Yeah.
And that just kind of, in a way, it's almost like the film is inadvertently about the power of conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
And
The
maybe
power
that
conviction at the
exactly,
very least.
exactly, yeah. And I don't know if that was his intent with it because it's been so long since I've seen it. I can't make that claim now, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that is some people's perspective on the film.
I wouldn't be surprised either. And obviously, like, John F. Kennedy has been mined to death. So much media out there on this subject. And I mean, it murkies the waters when our government does things and says things that certainly make you scratch your head at times.
Yeah.
And, that whole ethos of you should never believe what the government tells you is a big part of this movie in a lot of ways, for better or worse. And, to me, it says something about the power of art and the power of storytelling and just having a brazen confidence.
Yeah.
Like none of this could be true as far as we know and how it all played out in real life.
Sure. I think that's
But-
that's what's so interesting about it. I remember I think it was 10th grade, we actually had a project in our history class where our teacher assigned us to come up with our own theory on what happened to JFK and have evidence to back it up. It was kind of an interesting assignment,
Yeah.
although pretty much everyone in the class said it was the mob. So it's
So, and again, maybe this is one of those conspiracy theories where everyone buys into the conspiracy.
exactly, yeah.
Because the Warren Report, there's so much about it that doesn't make sense. And this film really inadvertently, in a lot of ways, rips that to shreds with its storytelling, though. It's not just a documentary or a man on a box screaming, the Warren Commission is awful and we shouldn't believe it. Like, that's not what this film is doing.
Right.
It's, if anything, it's a rebuttal to it, but doing it through storytelling and making its arguments in these really compelling ways through visual storytelling.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are times where, again, it's exposition or he's using archival footage for certain things. And so it lacks a little bit of bite in those moments. But for the most part, he's making arguments by using his characters that he's written and putting
Sure.
them in scenarios where they're using the space in which these things happened and demonstrating that what the Warren Commission says, there's no way that it's true. And here's why. And it shows us these things. And they're making these just grand arguments in these really compelling ways. Like, I think of, and again, forgive me, I can't remember the characters' names, but it's Kevin Costner's Jim character and
Jim Garrison, yeah.
yeah.
I have it up here. Yeah.
Yeah, Jim Garrison and one of his guys. I don't think it's the Michael Rooker character. I'm trying to remember. At any rate, they're in the building in which Oswald did the shooting, and they're talking through like all of the points in which there had to have been 3 guys. And they're like, if you're going to do this crossfire section, you're going to put a guy there. You have Oswald here, and then you'll put another guy over here. And they start laying out these arguments. You're like, okay, I don't know if that's what happened, but what they're saying makes a lot of sense. Like, I could see that being true. You know what I mean?
That's all it takes.
And that's
all it
one
takes
example,
sometimes.
but there's a lot of that in the film.
Yeah, but that's all it takes. That's the power of it all, right? And that's what's so interesting about it. And while there is a lot of expository dialogue in the film, I will say I do remember it's for some reason it's just fun to listen to these characters talk.
Oh yeah,
these people
yeah.
talk. Yeah,
The performances make it all the more alluring and captivating for sure.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between watching something like this and these absurd documentaries on Netflix about the Titanic never really sank or we never went to the moon. And those documentaries are clearly underfunded. They don't have much of a budget, and you can tell they're making up a lot of this on the spot. Or they're just amping
they're
up
getting
the
by
conspiracy
on
for
the
attention.
extremes of their conspiracy.
Yes, and
That's
it's
really
there's
all
just
it is.
it's you watch those and you're like, there's no conviction here, and so much of what they're saying is easily, debunked. Absolutely, and I just don't feel like that's the case. I mean, maybe some of the stuff that he puts up here can be debunked. Again, I don't really know, but when I'm watching it, there is a distinct, like, I'm having a very different experience than watching that nonsense on Netflix. I'm watching this,
Right.
and I'm buying into it. Whether it's true or not, the convictions are so strong because the filmmaking, the art is so strong that even if this is a load of nonsense, it's such a goddamn good movie. It's so great.
I need to watch it again. I really do. It's been a long time.
Well, and it's funny because, I try to be diligent with when I go to bed because I got 2 kids now, and
Yeah.
sleep is it
important.
can elude me sometimes.
Yeah.
But
there are 2 medicines for adults, sleep
Yeah.
and coffee.
Exactly. But thankfully, this was Saturday night, and my wife didn't have to work on Sunday, so I was able to, take advantage a little bit. But it wasn't even one of those things that was planned. Like, I put this on, and I wasn't sure if we were going to get to the whole thing because it was late when we even put this on.
Yeah.
And I watched the whole thing, and I didn't even think anything of it. It was like 1:00 in the morning when it finished. I was like, oh my God, it's so late. I need to go to bed. I got to get up in like 5 hours when Andrew's up. You know what I mean? Like,
It's such a. I cannot wait to get to that point in my life when I become a dad where I realize going to bed at 1 a.m. is technically considered late.
Yeah, that is way late for me. Like, way super late for me.
Wow, that's a Tuesday for me.
Yeah, no,
It's not that bad.
like, Andrew was up at 6:30 in the morning. So whether I want to be up that early or not doesn't matter.
You don't have a choice.
That's when he's up.
Yeah, you don't have a choice.
Yeah. So
Yeah. You've got an alarm clock now with a pulse. So
exactly.
You take care of it.
I mean, Brandy might let me sleep in a little bit, but when the kids are up and running around, like, even if she was going to let me sleep in, there's too much noise. I mean, you're not really sleeping. That's just the way it is.
And
so
you really need 2 parents there to help things out. Yeah, it's important.
At any rate, I guess we'll end it there. We definitely went longer here than planned, but that's the fun of it all. We
love our patrons.
Yeah, thank you to all of our patrons. You guys are the best. If there's anything you want us to talk about, hit us up with some suggestions. We'll certainly, talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. So with that, we're going to get ready to record the episode, and we hope you guys enjoy.